Good morning, everyone. We are going live. We just had some technical difficulties due to the change in date and time that we had from last week to this week. So I'm going to give it just a minute for people to jump on since we're starting just a tiny bit late. And then we're going to jump into expanding human capacity, achieving peak neuroperformance with neuroscience based strategies. So, the reason that I am putting on this webinar is I shared this message a couple of weeks ago or about a month ago at a St. Louis Society of Human Resource Management event. And I got a lot of really positive feedback on the usefulness and impact of the message. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to share this message again and do it in a virtual webinar setting so that others who maybe missed the message, if you're local to St. Louis, or those who live elsewhere could also get an opportunity to see and hear this message. So, in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who I am. I'm going to tell you a little bit more, not about my bio or like my work history, but my story and why it is that I'm here, why it is that I'm sharing this message, and why it is that I am presenting on this topic. But before I do that, it's really important to me that anytime I present information, I share stories, I present on any topic, that you walk away with actions, that you walk away with something that you can actually do and take action upon. We know that from neuroscience, when we present information, we forget 50% of it in the first hour, 70% of which we forget in the first day, and 90% will forget within a week. So instead, I want you to have an experience that really changes you and that you walk away with some action. So I'm going to start with some actions, and they may not make sense to you at first, and that's okay. It will by the end. So the 4 actions I want you to be looking for and I want you to be thinking about in order to expand your capacity is: 1, balancing your body, learning how to balance your nervous system. 2, it's going to be experiencing neurophysiological or long-term change. How do you create change or evolution or growth that lasts over the long term? The third thing is going to be accessing your unique inner wisdom, the inner knowing and knowledge that you have that you can apply in your life. And then finally, it's going to be embodying greater self awareness, where you live your life every day from that state of greater self awareness. So these are the 4 actions. And if you don't yet know what they all mean, that's okay. We're going to go into that. But this kind of gives you a roadmap of where we're going today. Now, let me get back to my story. So, my story starts on a Saturday afternoon in May of 2021. And I was working on writing my first book when I got a phone call that would change my life forever. It was my IT manager who called with devastating news. Our organization had been hit with a ransomware attack. Now, you see, this event on its own, although surprising and something I thought only happened in movies, would not have been enough to change my life so dramatically if not for the years leading up to it. But it was this event, it was this ransomware attack and the stress that followed and the long, hard days as our system was taken down and we were pen and paper for at least 3 weeks. That stress is what tipped me over the edge. It's what tipped me over into extreme burnout. Although it would take me a long time to be able to recognize and label it as such. But see, here's the thing. I didn't understand what was going on in my body. I didn't understand what was happening in the years leading up to this event that ultimately led me into my burnout experience. What happens in our lives is that as we're living our lives, as we're having different interactions, our bodies are unconsciously reacting to our environment. Our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, is reacting to every experience that we have. And it's either moving up, if you look at the top of that chart, into a fight or flight sympathetic mode. Think outrunning the tiger, where it's reacting to stress and danger. Or it's dropping to the bottom, where we're in freeze mode. Think of the lizard who plays dead, who stops moving in order to avoid becoming prey. Our bodies are constantly moving up and down in this chart in response to the encounters and experiences and stresses that we are encountering every day in our lives. And it's doing so unconsciously. It's running in the background. It's doing this to quite literally keep us alive, to quite literally keep us going. But what I didn't recognize and what I didn't realize was that this stress over time builds up, that each time I experienced a stressful event and didn't completely recover, that stress was building on itself. You see, after my son was born in 2016, I developed multiple autoimmune conditions. And amidst my battle to figure out how to navigate and respond and heal from those, I became pregnant with twins. And those twins were born in the summer of 2019, and they had a food protein intolerance, which meant they could not tolerate any type of formula, which meant I was going to have to keep feeding them. And I was going to have to be their sole source of nutrition. Took me a long time to get back into the office, back into full swing. You see, at the time, I was the vice president of shared services, which meant I had responsibility for IT, HR and talent management, customer service, project coordination, order management, a whole lot of supporting functions. I just made it back into the office at the beginning of 2020. When, of course, we all know what happened next. We were sent home with a global pandemic and all the stresses that accompanied the global pandemic, figuring out how to work remotely, figuring out all of the new laws that were being passed, figuring out how to navigate people working from home, all of those challenges that we were navigating on a daily basis. And I was doing it with 9-month-old twins and a 4-year-old boy at home while both my husband and I were trying to work. It was extremely stressful, just like so many of us all experienced. And then in the fall of 2020, in the fall of 2022, like so many workplaces, we decided to do a workforce reduction. And at the same time, we thought it would be a good idea to also change our sales coverage model, our phone call handling system and phone system, our learning management system, and upgrade our business system. It really wouldn't be a surprise then that my stress level was so high to most people, but to me, I thought I had it all under control. I thought we had succeeded. I thought we had faced all this stress and that we were winning, that we were doing a great job in response until that ransomware call and the stress that followed, which tipped me over the edge, which caused me to fall into extreme burnout. Now, see, I didn't know what the definition of burnout was at the time. It's taken me a while to recognize that burnout doesn't look like this. It isn't some big, massive explosion or some complete mental breakdown. Burnout is a slow burn, it's a spark that starts a slow fire that spreads and spreads until you're surrounded by a forest fire and you don't know how you got there. Burnout isn't quick, it's slow. And it looks like a person who's still functioning. So how do we define or recognize or look for the symptoms of burnout? So burnout results from chronic workplace stresses that have not been successfully managed. Now, I underlined have not been successfully managed because I readily admit I was not successfully managing that stress. I was not successfully managing the challenges and the stresses that I was encountering. And so it resulted in me feeling exhausted and a lack of energy. It resulted in increased mental distance. And I started to get negative and cynical about my job. And then ultimately, I felt like I wasn't as productive or accomplished. And I became disengaged. Now, see, what's surprising about this to me and what was so hard for me to recognize was that everything seemed to be going well. Everything seemed to be going great. Our organization had just been recognized for the third time in a row as a Gallup Global Exceptional Workplace, not an award won easily. My team members had just surprised me by nominating me as a manager of the year, and I was a 2020 finalist. We were doing all of the things that organizations are supposed to do, all of the things that all of the experts said. This is what you do to have peak performance. This is what you do to reach those results, to accomplish those outcomes. We were doing it all. And we were seeing the financial successes, we were seeing the metrics and the productivity and everything come together. But see, it still all went wrong. And I ended up in burnout. And I wanted to figure out, why did I have this experience? What went wrong? What didn't I know or understand about performance? And so I spent the last 2 years researching, getting certified, and discovering how to get this answer to my own experience, discovering how human performance works so that I could answer that question: what happened to me? And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm sharing this message. That's why I share this message anywhere anyone is willing to listen, because I hope that it can positively impact your life, other people's lives. So, I want to tell you a few things about me, things I want you to know about me going into this message. First of all, I'm not a neuroscientist or a researcher. I am a practitioner, and I am focused on practical application. I'm focused on how can we put this to use to help and benefit us. I didn't get certified on all of these neuroscience based techniques for my business or for money. I learned about these things for myself. I learned about these things to live my life in order to have more exceptional experiences. I knew that there had to be a better way than the way that I was living, and I knew that I had to find it. I knew that I had to find a better way to live, if for no other reason than to guide, nurture, and help my children to grow and navigate the challenges in this world. Children today are facing more stress, more loneliness, more depression. Suicide rates are higher than they've ever been. And that is due to the environment and experiences we've created. And I knew that if I wanted to help them figure out how to live differently, that I had to do it first, that I had to figure out a new way of being, a way where we are rewired and optimized for peak performance in this world that's filled with stress and challenges. Now, ultimately, what I've discovered is the power of neuroscience based approaches applied to people and performance. That when we use a neuroscience based approach to evolving ourselves and our cultures, it can make a massive difference for people and for workplaces. And I really couldn't believe that I hadn't learned it before. That despite all of my years of education and learning and self development, that I hadn't encountered these concepts, and that it wasn't already standard practice in workplaces today. Now, certainly there are people out there that are talking about this topic. There are people out there that are knowledgeable and trying to spread this information, but there are still far more people that don't know it than do. And so I believe fundamentally that, of course, this is needed by our workplaces and our leaders, and it's needed by everyone, because we are all leaders in our own homes. We are all leaders in some sense of the word, and that we need to figure out how to do life differently, how to be different as we live our lives. And so that's why I'm here, to share a little bit of this approach and some strategies that are hopefully going to make a big difference in your life. So, a couple things this might mean for this session. You might not believe me. I've learned a lot, and I also don't know everything. In fact, if I were you, I would distrust anyone who claims that they do. I don't have enough time in 1 hour to give you all of the data and the information and the background and the research to support what I'm about to tell you. You're just going to have to trust me that it exists. You might not like how I present this message. It might not be presented in the way you most like. I have incorporated all three learning styles, which means everyone's going to want a little bit more of their own style, and everyone's going to leave with something. You might just think this is a new trend. Oh, this is another thing that they're talking about. But I want to highlight here that this is not a replacement for past practices. The things that you've done are still useful and incredibly valuable. This is an additional approach to help address the challenges that you're facing right now and the future challenges that you're likely to face in the world of work in the future. And then finally, my personal favorite is that maybe you won't like me. I used to present and go and deliver webinars and messages trying to make everyone happy, to be as neutral and uncontroversial as possible. But I'm not sharing this message to make you like me. I'm trying to create an experience that might positively impact your life. I'm trying to share wisdom and information that can make a difference in your life. Now, if you were in one of my multi-day trainings and certifications, I could guarantee you would have a transformative experience. And it's incredibly difficult to do that in a 1 hour webinar setting. So, taking that into consideration and the difficulty of it, I need you to fully engage in this experience. I need you to get attentive and get focused and participate in the things that I ask you to participate in and in the activities that I share with you. And that's going to give you the best opportunity to have this experience bring value to your life. So I ask you now to start thinking of one challenge or issue, something you want to change, to overcome, do differently, but you haven't been able to do it. This is not something you're going to be asked to share. Obviously, we're in a webinar, an online setting, but just identify one thing, one challenge or issue so that you can work through some of the processes later in the presentation. So let's jump into the challenge. What's happening today that really requires a neuroscience based approach to the performance? One of the ways that really helps us from a neuroscience perspective learn new concepts is to relate them through analogies to things that we're more familiar with, to things that we've experienced before or that we generally know about. This helps us to recall information more effectively. So I would like to ask you to go on a journey with me today, a journey where we're going to climb a mountain. Now, what I like to think of when I think of a mountain and when I think of performance is that everyone has a mountain that they're climbing. Everyone has their own mountain that they're climbing in their own roles and in the roles that they perform. And everyone's mountain looks a little bit different. Some people will climb Mount Everest, other people may climb the Missouri Ozark Mountains, but everyone is going to climb their own mountain and everyone has one. So, what is it that we need to do before we go? Before we go on our journey, if we're going to go climb a mountain, what do we have to do first? Well, we have to take time to prepare. We have to take time to get ready. We have to get the resources that we need. We have to get the maps, the information, the equipment, the guides, all the things that we have to do so that we can be ready to go on our mountain journey, so we can be ready to climb a mountain. What state do we want to be in? If we're going to go climb, let's say we're going to climb Mount Everest, what state do we need to be in? Well, we need to be in our best, right? We need to be at peak performance. We need to be at our very best, our very strongest. Why is it so important that we do this? Why do we need to do it? Because if we don't, we run the risk that we won't get where we're trying to go, that we'll get hurt along the way, or worse, we won't make it at all. People die trying to get to the top of Mount Everest all of the time. So we have to get ready. We have to get ourselves into this peak performing state because if we're not in that peak performing state, we certainly won't enjoy the experiences that we're having as we're climbing our performance mountain. So, this is how I define peak performance in my book, The Exceptional Life Revolution. I define peak performance as when we have evolved and optimized ourselves to operate at the highest level of our personal capabilities and in a way that produces positive results and creates exceptional experiences in our lives. And I highlight produces positive results and creates exceptional experiences because it's more important that we're optimized so we can enjoy the climb than it is about getting to the destination. It's more important that we are enjoying the results of our efforts, that what we're doing is creating the outcomes that we want in our lives and in our life experiences than it is about getting to some destination. And so when we optimize ourselves, it is for that purpose. So, what exactly is preventing us from operating at our peak? What is it that's getting in the way? Now, if we were live together, I would have us do this activity, but I'm going to talk through it in this virtual setting. And I want you to think as though you have a jar in front of you and you have a set of rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. And the rocks represent the big things, the most important things in our lives, the things that take up the most room, our work, our family, our well being, our development, and the challenges we face. The pebbles are the everyday, the things that occur, the projects, events, vacations, birthdays, holidays, the flat tires, the things that take up time and energy. And the sand are the everyday life, the feeding, the bathing, the cleaning, the bills. And then ultimately, the water is stress that's created by everything else. Now, most of you, if you've heard of this activity before or are experienced it before, it's about time management. And it's about how can we put all of this into a jar in the right order to fit the most into it. Because if we start with the water and then the sand and then the pebbles, the rocks will never fit. The rocks will never be able to get into the jar because they will no longer fit by the time we've added those other things. But if you start with the rocks and then the pebbles and then the sand and then the water, you can fit more into it, which is great for time management. The challenge is if there's too much water, there's too much stress in our lives. If we've accumulated all those levels of stress we talked about earlier, like I did in my life, it doesn't matter how you put them into the jar, the stress, the water is still going to overflow. It's still going to overflow beyond the bounds of the jar. So if you're making these decisions, I want to just reflect and discuss this a little bit. What would you choose to leave out and what would you choose to fit in? As you're trying to put as much into that jar as possible, how would you make it all fit? Can you see how this exercise relates to our own lives? Can you see how often we try to fit all of the things into our lives, but we have so much stress that we end up overflowing? Many of us feel, I know I do from time to time, that you can't fit it all in, that your cup is overflowing and there's just no more room for anything more. But what if we could fit everything we needed, all of it, into a cup? What would we need? What we need in order to fit it all? And then the question becomes, why not just get a bigger container? Why not just get more capacity? You see, this is exactly what happened to me on my journey. As I was climbing my mountain, I wasn't equipped. I wasn't ready. I wasn't at peak performance. No matter how long or hard I worked to climb that mountain, I wasn't going to get there because I was out of shape. I wasn't optimized. My cup was overflowing. I didn't have the capacity that I needed to manage all that stress and all those challenges all at the same time. And the first thing I learned is that I wasn't alone, that there are lots of people out there experiencing the same thing. In fact, 76% of employees experience burnout at least some of the time in their job in 2022. Lots of people are at or beyond capacity. So, what has changed in our lives that got us to this point? What has changed that's impacting our journeys, our performance? Well, there's a couple things. And I have a theory that that many people are still at or over capacity because of all the stress we experienced in the last few years, because of all the challenges that we went through. There's more water filling our cups than there ever was before. And on top of that, our terrain has changed and we're climbing new mountains. We have new challenges that are blocking our paths. We're dealing with AI, with remote work or hybrid working. We're dealing with new challenges of these rivers of stress that are overflowing our cups. And we're in a new world of work where things are changing, where things are more imaginative, innovative, conceptual. Things are changing in terms of how and what we do in our workplaces. And all of that is impacting how ready we are, how we're able to operate at peak performance. So, what's the solution? Well, the best way isn't usually the easiest way. It would be easier to just stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Pretend things are the same. Let's go back to the way things were. We don't need to do anything differently. But the solution is to look at and acknowledge what's going on and figure out how can we expand people's capacity? How do we help people get a bigger cup so that they can handle all of the stress and life's challenges and the things that they have in front of them? Now, when it comes to expanding our capacity, the type of development that we need is vertical development. Now, maybe you've heard of the difference between horizontal and vertical development, but I want to highlight it here. So, horizontal development on the right is the doing. Horizontal development is increasing our competence, our skills, our knowledge, our experience. It is the how, the what we're going to do to know more. So, it's like filling up the cup. It's more information, more skills, more knowledge. Vertical development is getting the bigger cup. Vertical development is about being. It's about our self awareness, our capability, how we exist. And the challenge is that if a person's cup is already full, if a person's already overflowing, then adding more information, teaching them new skills on how to communicate more effectively or develop more resilience isn't going to work. Think about it like a child at the end of the day. I've got 4-year-old girls. So if I have my 4-year-old twin girls and it's the end of the day, they've been working at school all day, they're exhausted, they're hungry, they're tired, and now I sit them down and I say, "Let's learn some math. Let's work on our numbers." How well is that going to work? Not very, right? When people are overflowing, they can't take in any more. Now, one of the challenges that we have is that when we talk about growth and development, most people start to think that means that there's something wrong, that we're broken and we need to be fixed, that we need to fix the things, our weaknesses, our challenges, the things that aren't working. We have to fix this brokenness or this deficit. But the truth is, it's really the mirror we're looking in that's broken, not us. Our neural pathways, our bodies have done the very best with the resources that we have. As we've lived our lives, we've had experiences and lived in different environments and developed relationships and cultures. And all of that has imprinted on our nervous system, our neurons, our muscles, our bodies, and created neural pathways, created the way that our body responds, reacts, and interacts with the world. And that is impacting everything, our reactions, our interactions, our relationships, just everything that we do. And those patterns are meant to help us. It's created those ways of being so that it can conserve energy by repeating the way we do and respond to things so that we can use less energy. We don't have to consciously think about every decision and every response, but our bodies are wired to help us do that naturally. And so, what I propose we have to do differently is to stop fixing and start evolving. We have to start looking at, instead of how do I fix things that aren't working, how do I evolve myself to work even better, to change those neural pathways? Because the truth is, we are always evolving in response to our experiences and environment. We must choose to be intentionally involving ourselves in ways that create more exceptional experiences on our life journey. We must choose to look at our lives and our experiences and the encounters that we have and intentionally use them to evolve ourselves, to create those new neural pathways. So how do we do that? How do we evolve ourselves? How do we create this greater self-awareness with this neuroscience vertical development based approach? So I want you to think about, if you're going to go on a mountain journey and you're going to climb a mountain, you need a map. And you need to learn how to read that map. You need to know what the different lines mean, how to use the compass, how to navigate the terrain, and which lines mean that the train is going up, and which lines mean that these are paths or different ways to go. We need to learn how to really use that map. And so I want you to think of self awareness as learning how to use our map, and the map being our bodies, the map being ourselves. How do I navigate my life more effectively by understanding my map, which is myself? And when it comes to self-awareness, there are two types of self-awareness. There is conceptual and embodied self-awareness. Now, most of us, when we think of self awareness, really mean conceptual self awareness. Conceptual self awareness is our ability to identify our identities, it's based on our past and what we want to be in the future. So it's things like our talents, our values, our interests, our motivations. It's all about who we've been and who we want to ultimately be. It's how we think about ourselves. Embodied self awareness is the one that I knew a lot less about, and the one that I think most people miss, which is the experience within yourself. And it's all about our ability to feel ourselves in space, encompassing our senses and tapping into our neural networks in the present moment. Embodied self awareness can only occur in the present moment. And it's all about identifying our emotions, our physical responses in the body, our instinctive urges, and then labeling all of those experiences that we're having. That's our embodied self awareness. Now, a lot of people think that they have self awareness, but according to Harvard Business Review's study, 95% of people believe that they have it, while only 15% of people actually have good self awareness. And the statistic is even worse when you get into leaders. So, self awareness is something that many of us need to be working on. Many of us need to be tapping into so that we can expand our capacity. Now, all true knowing is in the doing. So I'm going to lead you through some exercises. And after this webinar, we will have the ability for you to go download this worksheet. If you want to get this worksheet, you can access it so you can walk through it yourself. In the meantime, you can kind of just follow along as you're watching this webinar and jot some notes on a piece of paper if you've got one. So, as all true knowing's in the doing. So I encourage you to do it because your body's gonna remember it even if your mind does not. So take the time to do some of these exercises. It really will make a difference. So the first thing we have to do to get greater embodied self-awareness, to really expand our capacity, is balancing our bodies. And that starts with becoming present. That starts with becoming present in the moment. Most of us spend our lives running between where we've been and where we're going. What was the conflict, interaction, meeting that we just had, actions that we just took out of it, and then what is our to-do list? What do we have to do next? What's the next thing we're going to accomplish? What's the next thing we have to do? And how are we doing it? Getting through that long list of things we have to accomplish. We spend so much time pulled from the past to the future that we spend very little time in the present. And I love this quote: if there is a feather on a marble floor in the past or the future, no matter how hard you blow, can you move it? And the truth is that we can't, right? We can't affect anything that's been or will be. We can only impact the present, which is where embodied self awareness, where true growth and development happens, only in the present moment. So, in order to balance our bodies, we have to start by getting present. We have to start by coming into the present moment. Then we have to look at how do we access more of our energy. Often, when we think about our lives and all the things that we have in it, we say we just need more time, just need more time to do all of the things. But what we really mean, or what we really should be saying, is that we need more energy and capacity to do more with the same amount of time. Because we can't actually create more time, but we can create more energy. And we create more energy by learning how our nervous system works and discovering how to bring our stress back down to baseline. So instead of wasting energy carrying all those boulders, like I talked about earlier, all the boulders that we're trying to carry up the mountain as we're climbing our mountain, if we can learn to put them down, if we can learn to bring our stress back to a baseline, then we get more energy. And as we looked at earlier today, the different nervous system states that we go in, that we find ourselves in, each of them is associated with a set of emotions or a set of feelings and experiences that we're having. If we can see that how stress gets stored in the body and how stress exists within the body, even if it's not apparent on the surface. Remember when I told my story, I thought I had everything under control. I thought everything was great and I was doing well and I was succeeding and everything was perfect. But what I didn't know was what was being stored under the surface. And we can measure that by looking at a person's heart rate variability, which is the measure between beats. Our heart rate doesn't beat in even increments. It beats faster and then slower. It beats differently each time. And when we're experiencing a lack of coherence, when we've got that stress stored in our body and we're experiencing emotions like frustration, anxiety, worry, fear, anger, when we're experiencing those negative emotions, it impairs our performance. It impairs our ability to deliver and accomplish and do more. Alternatively, when we get into coherence, when our heart rate variability is in coherence and it's in a balanced beat, like that chart there, and we're feeling those more positive, balanced emotions that exist around the middle of that chart on the left, it's what creates optimal performance. It promotes us being at our best and having access to more energy. And so, what we have to do is look at different strategies to shift the state of our nervous system so that we can put those boulders down, so that we can access more of our energy and perform in an optimal state, perform in a state where we can produce better results. And one of the best and simplest ways to do this is through balanced breathing. In a second, I'm going to click the recording and we're going to do this for about a minute so that you get a sense of or a feeling of what it means to move into a balanced breathing state. And what all balanced breathing, all it means is that you're going to breathe in for 6 seconds and out for 6 seconds. You're going to breathe in a balanced state. And when you do this for 2.5 minutes, it completely resets your nervous system. It brings you back to that balanced state. And I like to call that balanced state, or I like to refer to that as when you see children that are just happy and joyful and in that balanced, playful state. That's what balance looks like. That's what we want to be shooting for. And so I'm going to take a minute to do this exercise, bring you to the present, and just have you notice some things as you're in the present. So listen to the dings, and as you do, they're at even 6-second increments. So you can breathe in for 6 seconds and out for 6 seconds. And in and out. On this next breath, I want you to notice where you're breathing. Are you breathing into your chest? Are you breathing into the fullness of your belly? Often, when we're in a stress state, our breath stays in our chest. We breathe shallow. Try to expand your breath so that you're breathing fully into your belly, filling your lungs and your diaphragm with air. Now, I just want you to notice, keep your breathing even, and I want you to notice what you feel within your body. Does it feel warm? Does it feel cold? How does it feel sitting in the chair that you're sitting in? How do your feet feel on the floor? Do you notice any tension in your body? Is there a part or a place where there's pain or discomfort or tightness? Notice if you smell anything or taste anything. Take in the information from all your senses. And it's through this process, through really paying attention to those inner sensations within our body, that allows us to come fully into the present and bring our nervous system into balance. I'm going to bring you back to the present. And I want to talk next, now that we're in that balanced state, about expanding your capacity by experiencing neurophysiological long term lasting change. So, when you think about now that we're in this present state, what is it that we need to change? What do we have to consider is getting in our way or preventing us from getting more capacity, from having that more energy? What is causing that stress? What is causing us to store that stress? And what's preventing us from performing better? What's blocking us from better results or from the behaviors or actions that are getting in our way of having better experiences on our journey or having those better relationships? And one of the things I kept noticing and that really frustrated me as a talent management or HR leader was when I would train managers and they knew what to do, they knew why they needed to do it, they knew how to do it. Some of them even really wanted to be doing it, but they just wouldn't actually do it. Something was preventing them from doing the things that were expected of them as managers. I bet many of you have had this experience where either you've trained a manager or you've had a manager or you yourself have known what to do, why to do it, and how to do it, but you still couldn't actually make yourself do it. So let me give you an example. So say the action or the result is that there's somebody who's not setting expectations or giving feedback. And maybe the behavior is that they're making excuses for not giving feedback, that there's no time and they're too busy. They can't, they don't have time to set expectations or give feedback because they have too much to do. And that's what you see in terms of a behavior. Most of the time, this is where we stop. We stop at the surface level and address only the behavior, which makes sense because we can see the behavior that needs to change. But it doesn't work to just change the behavior. And when we do this, we might try to give them a strategy or set goals in order to in order to accomplish that result. But that doesn't usually work. It doesn't usually stick. They don't keep doing it. And so what we have to do is we have to get below the surface. We have to get underneath the behaviors and look at the thinking. So maybe this person is thinking this is my friend and if I give them feedback, they won't like me anymore. If they quit or find a new job, it's going to hurt everyone. It's going to hurt the company, it's going to hurt the team. And they're feeling nervous that it would impact their relationship or they're worried that the feedback would cause that person to leave and hurt the team. And underneath that nervousness and that worry, those feelings is the emotion, the core emotion of fear. They have fear. But what triggered the emotion? What led to all those layers underneath the surface? That's our nervous system, how our neural pathways are wired based on our past experiences. And it's that physiology, that nervous system, and those past experiences that are leading to the results, not the behaviors alone. It's everything that's underneath the surface. So let's try this together. I want you to go back to the challenge that we talked about at the beginning, something in your life that you have wanted to change or you've tried to change and you haven't been able to, and write down the issue. What's your current state? What's the challenge? And then I want you to define the outcome that you want. What's the desired result? What is the desired outcome that you would like if you were to resolve this issue, if you were to have your ideal state? What would that look like? Take just a second to jot that down, jot a couple notes. And you see, one of the things that we do is we define our outcomes and then we try to map our way to get to that outcome. What are the steps, the actions, the goals, the projects, the habits we need to create to establish in order to get to that outcome? The problem is that we don't know if the outcome we've defined for ourselves is truly the right outcome. And if we could just lay out the steps or actions to get to that outcome and get there, we probably would have already done so. So instead, I want you to try something different. I want you to try defining what it is that's blocking you. What is blocking or preventing you from getting to your desired future state, from getting to that desired outcome? What is getting in the way? And just jot down the things that come to mind that are getting in the way. Now we're going to try a different approach that uses this iceberg, that uses these layers of thinking, feeling, emotion, and physiology that exists beneath the behavior. And so I want you to start in your body. And I want you, as you think about the issue and what's blocking you, what do you experience in your body as you think about the issue? Maybe you experience some tension. Maybe you want to like squeeze your hands together or clamp your jaw. Maybe there's some anxiety in your chest. What do you notice in your body as you think about the issue? And as you're noticing what you experience in the body, what's the emotion that starts to come to the surface that is accompanying those sensations? And there's this set of core emotions that I think are useful, whether it's happy, sad, anger, fear, disgust, surprise, or shame. Usually it's one of these core emotions that are coming up as we're having that physical experience in our body. And as soon as we start to experience an emotion, we typically start thinking and feeling, having thoughts and feelings about that emotion. And so, what feelings or thoughts do you have as a result of that emotion? If there's fear, are you starting to try to make sense of that fear? Or anger, are you starting to try to justify or come up with reasons why it's appropriate that you're angry? What feelings or thoughts do you have as a result of those emotions? And then what thoughts are created by the feelings, or what feelings are created by those thoughts? We know that feelings and thinking go back and forth and back and forth. So as we think things, we may feel things. And as we feel things, we may think things. And then what behaviors are being created by those thoughts and feelings? What are we doing when you think and feel this way? What action do you tend to take? And then what's the result when you take that action? And can you start to see how what led you to your behaviors and your actions or your results started in your physiology, started with something that was rooted within you, rooted within your neural pathways? And again, not that anything is wrong with that pathway or with that way of being, it was created for a reason. But if it's no longer serving us, then how might we go about rewiring it? How might we go about changing it? So, this is where we look at expanding our capacity by really accessing our inner wisdom and learning how to rewire those neural pathways, learning how to change those ways of being so that we create a different result, so that we take different actions in our lives. And one of the reasons that this approach works so much more effectively is because it's based on your unique experiences. The way that we exist, the way that we show up in the world, each and every one of us is completely different. How our neural pathways were created is entirely different than everyone else because we've all had and lived different experiences. And in our physiology, in our way of being, where our neural pathways are rooted, they're going to influence our actions. And so we have to get to our unique neural pathways. We have to understand how we are uniquely wired. Almost all learning and development is focused on the doing. How do we do this? The horizontal development. What do I need to do in order to accomplish a different result? So in the example we went over before, what goals do I need to put in place to give more feedback, to set more expectations? What do I need to do? When truly, in order to expand our capacity, we need to really focus on our being. How are we being? How are we showing up? Who are we when we show up to accomplish or do something. So, how do we change our neural pathways? According to the latest neuroscience research and Grant Suselu, technically we have at least three brains. And all that means is that we have neural networks in our head, our heart, and our gut, which are communicating through the vagal nerve, which are connected from a nerve that runs from our head all the way down through all of our organs. And that vagal nerve is sending messages back and forth. And most of the time, the issues that are embedded in our physiology, in our neural pathways are due to misalignments or blocks, to our brains not working together in the most effective and best way that they can. And so it starts by understanding that these blocks occur and understanding what each of their functions are so that we can figure out where we may be misaligned or where we may be blocked. And so the head brain has a set of each of these has a set of their own prime functions. And the head brain isn't really a surprise. Our head is responsible for taking in information, all of our perception, our senses, thinking about all of the things that it's taking in and then making meaning of it. What does all of this mean? How do I apply this or understand this in my life? That's what our head does. Now, our heart, I want you to think about somebody that you just really love, somebody that you just have such a connection to and you just love so, so much. Where do you feel that love? Put your hand where you feel that love. Most of us put our hand on our hearts because our hearts have the function and the responsibility for our emotions, our relational affect, our connection and relationships with others, and our values, what we find important. And then finally, we get to our gut. Most of us have had a gut instinct before, a gut feeling that we shouldn't walk down that dark alley, that something just isn't quite right. And that's for a reason, because our gut's prime function, one of our gut's prime function is self preservation, is our safety, is keeping us alive. And that self-preservation is tied directly with mobilization, the ability to take action or the decision to move and act. It's not surprising because in order to outrun the tiger or the lion, we actually have to run away. We have to mobilize in some way. So our gut is responsible for that taking action. And then it's also responsible for our core identity, for who we are, for who we feel we are and know ourselves to be. And those are the prime functions of the gut. Maybe now you can already start to see based upon the activity we just did going through the iceberg, which area maybe is a challenge for you. Which one was showing up? Which one was at play? And on the worksheet that we'll share, there are some questions. There are some ways to ask questions of your head, your heart, and your gut. What does your head really understand about this challenge? What does your heart truly feel about this challenge? And what does your gut deeply need to feel safe with respect to this challenge? And you can ask these questions, and will they will help you to unpack, to understand, to reflect on the challenges, to reflect on the on which one might not be at work, which one might need to be addressed in order to bring your three brains into alignment. But ultimately, our wisdom comes when we can align and integrate our three brains together. And when each of our three brains is operating at its highest capacity, when it's operating at its very best in its peak optimum state, our highest expression, our head is creative, our heart is compassionate, and our gut is courageous. And so when we can combine those together, the creativity of our head with the compassion of our heart, with the courage of our gut, that is how we get to our unique wisdom. That is how we get to the change, to the wisdom that's going to help us have long-term lasting and transformational change in our lives. So how do you expand your capacity? We have to embody this self awareness by becoming and being the most creative, compassionate, and courageous human we can. I like to put these little signs, these are window clings that I have, and I give out everywhere that I can to remind me what is the most creative, compassionate, courageous me I can be today, which is really another way of saying, how can I show up at peak performance today? How can I show up and climb my mountain and all the challenges and experiences that I will encounter in the best and highest performing state I can? And when we do this, when our being, the speed and quality of our embodied self is at its best, it's going to impact our doing, what we do and how well we do it, what we choose to accomplish and do, and how well we are doing at it. And so, one of the best ways that we can impact our results, our doing, is really by focusing first on our being, by going through our body, our energy, our brains, our emotions, and our experiences in order to create a more embodied self. And this is what I call neuroperformance. And I've got a fancy definition on the slide here of what neuroperformance is, but at its basic level, neuroperformance is just operating at peak performance. It's applying these strategies to expand our capacity and operate more effectively. And it applies to everyone in every role, everywhere. It impacts everything we do, no matter where we go. And what's particularly exciting right now in the world we live in today is that there are so much tools, technology, and training that can help us to access this, that can help us to truly understand our bodies in ways we never could before and apply it to impact our lives in positive ways. Now, I could end this message at this point, but I want to take it one step further. Maybe you've heard the parable about babies in the river. I heard Glennon Doyle speak about this about a year ago, and she shared the story of a villager who was by a river, and all of a sudden she saw a baby drowning in the river. So she jumped into the river and rescued the baby, pulled the baby out. Then she jumped in the river again and rescued another baby, pulling the baby out. And then she saw another baby. And pretty soon she had to call in the entire village, and all of the villagers were jumping in and pulling babies out, rescuing them from the river one after another, until one villager started to walk upstream, started to walk away. And they go, "Where are you going? We need your help." And he says, "I'm going upstream to figure out who's throwing all these damn babies in the river." And this is what I think we have to pay attention to. Not just how do we rescue people that are in burnout and stress and overwhelm, and how do we get them out of the river and help them? But we also have to go upstream and look at what created this system. Look at what created the lack of capacity and the overflow and the overwhelm and the burnout and the loneliness and all of the things that our workplaces and people in the world are experiencing today. And that's why I focus on not just helping individuals evolve, but also how do we change our workplaces to support expanding human capacity? How do we help our workplaces change what they're doing so it aligns with the science and the neuroscience of what creates optimum and expanded human capacity? If we want to change the result we're getting, we have to go upstream and change what we're doing that's creating that result. And that means evolving our workplaces, evolving our families, evolving our communities based on what we now know works. And I believe that there's 6 elements of a peak performance culture. And if you want access to these, you can download these on our website, but it starts with a people-driven, purpose-driven, and people-focused culture that creates an engaging experience, one where people have exceptional experiences with clear expectations, feedback, development, and accountability. And where there are peak performing people, where people's performance is optimized with these neuroperformance practices that increase self awareness, emotional intelligence, and create transformational growth. And ones where there is a high accountability mindset, where it's head fostered growth mindsets, where there is heart centered, high levels of a respectful environment, and where there is a gut supported, courageous community, safe and supportive community. And it's these elements that create that peak performance culture. Now, as I wrap up this webinar, I want to go back to the actions that I defined at the beginning about expanding your capacity. And the first action is I want you to balance your body, your nervous system with presence and breath. Start looking for opportunities to become more present and practice balanced breathing. Begin experiencing neurophysiological or long-term growth by getting to the root of your challenges, by really getting to the physiological response that's happening and getting below the surface of the behaviors. I want you to access your unique inner wisdom by aligning your three brains to rewire your neural pathways, by creating that alignment and removing the blocks and issues that are preventing you from accessing that wisdom. And then finally, by embodying self awareness, by becoming and being the most creative, compassionate, and courageous human that you can, by looking at how can you show up every day as the most creative, compassionate, and courageous human and apply it to all your decisions, all your interactions, and your relationships. And I guarantee you will see a difference. The last thing I ask you to do is one of the best ways we can learn is with social learning. So take one concept that you just learned and go teach one thing to someone else today. Call someone, talk to your spouse, talk to your kids, just teach one thing that you learned back, and you'll be far more likely to remember it. So, what now? All true knowing is in the doing. And I want you to ask yourself, what action will you take to evolve and optimize yourself and your workplace or your family for peak performance? What are you going to do differently? And if you really want to dive into this work, if you really want to remove some of those blocks and those misalignments and those things that are preventing you from expanding your capacity, and you want to get out of overwhelm, like the way that I was, where my cup was just overwhelming, overflowing with too much, then I encourage you to check out our Evolving You program, our Evolving You coaching program. We have it as individual, you can work individually or in a group setting and dive into each of these concepts in a much more deep and meaningful way that was guaranteed to create long term transformation in your life. And get in touch. Sign up on our email list. We're constantly giving out freebies, new opportunities, new giveaways, new strategies, new neuroperformance based approaches. We would love to have a discovery call with you to learn more about your life and your challenges and how we might best be able to serve you. For me, this is all about changing the world. It's all about making a bigger difference in the world. I had this tremendously challenging experience in my life. And I have learned so much about how to perform and live differently. And I hope that some of these strategies, some of the science and information that exists in the world can bring you just a ton of value. So please reach out to us, connect with us, learn more about us. We would love to learn more about you. I hope that you took away something from today's webinar. And if you have any questions, feel free to email and message us, as we always welcome the opportunity to interact with anyone who wants to engage on their performance journey and look at how they can create more exceptional experiences and enjoy their performance journey and their lives. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as I end everything that I do, I just want to remind you always keep evolving, keep looking at those opportunities to learn, to grow, to evolve, to rewire your neural pathways so you can live your best life, an exceptional life. Have a wonderful day.